Hi guys, and welcome to the next in our TBC class guide series. After our druid guide that we made most recently, I asked you guys what class you would like to see next, and the Warlock was the clear winner, so that is what we're going to be looking at today. So let's dive into it. So first off, we're going to be talking about our talents, our rotation abilities, our stat priorities, how to level 70, and any additional class specific points if they are applicable in this video. Now, this video is being made from the perspective of somebody who is already level 60 and looking to move into TBC Classic when it releases. As a result, we won't be talking about racial abilities, professions, or PvP. This is because racial abilities will already be set in stone if you have already leveled your character in Classic to transition into TBC. Professions, to a lesser extent, are much the same. Of course, they are changeable, but they are a big time investment and gold investment, so a lot of people will already have them leveled up in advance anyway. And finally, PvP is the last thing we won't be discussing, primarily because it's such a big subject it deserves its own video and probably going to be made by somebody else because TBC PvP is not my strong point. But that's enough preamble, let's dive in with the talents for the Affliction spec first. Okay, so the first talent spec that we're going to talk about is Affliction, and this is because it is the talent spec that most people are going to be using when they first go into raids, and that is because a lot of the time it's considered to be the best spec to be in when gear levels are relatively low in TBC. That is mostly going to be because of the Suppression talent, which reduces the chance to resist your Affliction spells by 10% when has it all 5 points in it. Now, obviously this essentially acts as hit rating for the Affliction Warlock, and as a result means that if you don't have as much hit rating on your gear, you're not going to be as handicapped as somebody who doesn't have this talent and no hit rating on their gear. As I'm sure you'll be able to infer from that, we are going to have 5 points in Suppression no matter what, but we're going to team that with 5 points in Improved Corruption, 2 in Improved Life Tap, 1 in Amplify Curse, 2 in Improved Curse of Agony, 2 in Nightfall, 3 in Empowered Corruption, 1 in Siphon Life, 5 in Shadow Embrace, 5 in Shadow Mastery, 5 in Contagion, 1 in Dark Pact, 3 in Malediction, and 1 in our bottom talent, Unstable Affliction. Now, that's going to see out everything that you want in the Affliction tree, but then moving over, because as always, this is the talent build you'll be starting with at level 60 going into TBC. We're going to spend some of our excess talents on Improved Imp and Improved Health Stone in the Demonology tree, and 5 points into Improved Shadow Bolt over in the Destruction tree. Now from there, we're going to want to spend our next 5 points, going from 60 to 65, into Bane to reduce the cast time on our Shadow Bolt, before putting 5 points into Devastation for increased critical strike chance with our Destruction spells. Now, this is going to be your level 70 build with Affliction in TBC, and it's going to be quite utility based, but without sacrificing too much in terms of your own damage output. For leveling, which is the primary focus of this guide, it's going to be absolutely fantastic and make you very popular with the people who are potentially forming the group that you might want to get into. The Improved Imp is going to give an improved Blood Pact spell, so your tank's going to have more HP. You're going to be able to increase the amount of health restored by your Healthstone, meaning there's less pressure on the healer. You're going to be able to provide additional damage bonuses from your Curse of Elements. You're also going to be able to reduce the physical damage caused by all mobs that are being affected by the majority of your spells. This is going to lead to you being an all-round fantastic character to bring into any group environment because of the amount of utility, if nothing else, that you bring, as well as also being able to dish out a substantial amount of damage over time with your dots. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about Demonology. Now, Demonology actually has a lot of ways that you can actually build into this talent tree, but I'm going to go over what I think is the best talent tree to build for Demonology for the purposes of getting from 60 to 70, and then still have you be viable at level 70 if you want to continue as Demonology. So we're going to start with 5 points in Demonic Embrace, 2 in Improved Health Stone, 3 in Fell Insight, Fell Domination, Fell Stamina, Demonic Aegis, Unholy Power, Master Summoner, Demonic Sacrifice, Master Demonologist, 1 point into Mana Feed, 3 into Demonic Resilience, Soul Link, Demonic Knowledge, Demonic Tactics, and Summon Felguard. From there, because this is again from level 60, we are going to have 5 points in Improved Shadow Bolt and 2 points into Bane. Now, I'll just talk over some of the features that may not be as obvious as others in this build. Obviously the main objective is to get down to Summon Felguard, because that is going to be your pet of choice while leveling, both in solo content and in a group environment. The point that is often in contention is going to be the point into Mana Feed. Now, Mana Feed does give you the ability to get pet mana back. Now, some people will say that certain playstyles don't require the mana generation for your pet. It is a point of contention. I don't think any more than 1 point is needed in Mana Feed, but I do find that there are occasions when you can run out of mana on your pet, particularly depending on what pet you are using. So for the sake of the 1 point, I like to have that point here so that I'm never caught without mana on my pet, which would obviously result potentially in my death. Beyond there, the majority of talents that you're going to pick up are going to be the ones that are amplifying your pet's capabilities. Unsurprisingly for Demonology, you are going to revolve primarily around your pet. Moving on from there, we've moved into the Destruction tree. Picking up 5 points in Improved Shadow Bolt. You're going to want this basically in every build you have, regardless of what spec you are. We're going to have 2 points out of the 5 into Bane, but then as we progress towards level 70, we are going to want to fill this out into the full 5. And then my preference from here is to move over into Affliction, pick up 5 points in Improved Corruption, and then go into Improved Life Tap, as you are going to have the potential for running out of mana, particularly at low gear levels. An Improved Life Tap, in my opinion, is a very underrated talent. Now lastly, we're going to talk about Destruction. Now Destruction has quite a few different points of contention, and I'm going to get them out of the way first. First of all, Destruction is not the spec that I would recommend for doing the journey from 60 to 70, which is the primary focus of this guide. Now, if you are going to go Destruction, then there are ways in which you can make it better for that journey, most notably being that most guides will tell you not to pick up Shadow Fury. If you are going to be going Destruction, pre-raid, you're going to want Shadow Fury. It's going to be very handy in a dungeon environment, as well as potentially when you are playing by yourself, because of the relatively on-demand stun on a very low cooldown that is AoE. So in a group environment, you can pretty much stun every pack of mobs with this ability, and that's going to be absolutely invaluable. If you are looking to use a Destruction build in a raid, then Shadow Fury is pretty much pointless most of the time. It's rare that the mobs are going to be stunnable, and of course you don't build around the clearing of trash, you build for boss damage, and Shadow Fury then becomes just a very weak hitting single target ability against raid bosses. So the other point of contention I mentioned was that I don't recommend Destruction overall to begin with for the leveling journey. If you are going to be following this guide and all of the recommendations I make for 60 to 70, including how you do it, i.e. going through the dungeon route, then the perks of Shadow Fury and a few other things within this build are going to make it potentially quite good as an option. But if you intend on playing outside of the dungeon mechanics, then you are going to have a much better time playing either Affliction or Demonology. But I digress. The build that you are going to want at level 60 when you begin your journey is going to be 5 points in Improved Shadow Bolt, Cataclysm, Bane, Devastation, Shadowburn, Destructive Reach, Intensity, Ruin, Nether Protection, 1 point out of 5 into Emberstorm, 2 out of 3 in Soul Leech, 3 out of 3 in Backlash, Shadow and Flame, Shadow Fury. We then move over into the Demonology tree, have 5 points in Demonic Embrace, 2 in Improved Healthstone, and 3 into Fell Intellect. From here, we are going to continue down when we make our journey to level 70 in the Demonology tree, picking up a point in Fell Domination, 3 into Fell Stamina, a point into Demonic Aegis, at which point I like to get my 2 points into Master Summoner, before moving back up into Demonic Aegis, and then your final point is a bit of a flex point, but I tend to go for Unholy Power for its increased DPS viability. But of course, at that point you will be level 70 anyway, and you may be considering respeccing into a build that's more appropriate. Destruction is going to be the best spec that you are going to want to run at level 70 in raids once you have gear. It is not the best spec at the start of the expansion, but moving into the latter stages it certainly becomes so when hit rating is much more easily acquired, and you don't need to worry about picking up suppression as a talent, which just in the early game at level 70 makes Affliction considerably more viable. Now that we've talked about our talents and what we're going to pick and why, it's about time we made some sense of it by understanding what abilities we're actually going to use when playing the game, and we'll start off with the Affliction Rotation. Now, the Affliction Rotation starts off pretty simple. You're going to want to maintain your Fell armor buff, as well as using your assigned curse. Now, your assigned curse can be one of 3 different curses when you are in a raid environment. It is either going to be that you will be maintaining the Curse of Elements debuff, the Curse of Recklessness debuff, or the Curse of Doom debuff. This does change when you are playing by yourself or in a 5-man environment, where you are either going to want to maintain Curse of Elements most of the time, or simply not bother with a curse if the fight isn't going to go on long enough to make it viable. When it comes to your pet of choice, you are always going to want to use your imp in group content, and you're probably going to want to use it for pretty much all of the rest of the time as well. If you are engaging in questing activities, then Voidwalker is of course still the tanky pet and still viable for that use, and other pets do have utility or are useful in PvP if you are engaging in that and use them appropriately, but however, your imp is always going to be a good choice thanks to the talents you've picked that are going to improve his capabilities. Now, the actual rotation as such, as it were, you are going to want to maintain Unstable Affliction and Corruption and Immolate and Siphon Life on your primary target. Then you are going to use Shadow Bolt as a filler. Now, there are a few amendments to make to this. That is the general rule you're going to want to follow. But things that of note are, if you have multiple targets, you'll be better off dropping Shadow Bolt as a filler in order to maintain the capacity for you to just keep these dots up on all of the targets as best you can. And also, when you reach a high gear level towards the end of the expansion, Immolate doesn't scale as well with gear as Shadow Bolt does, meaning it will get to a point where you're actually better off just simply dropping Immolate in its usage entirely and getting extra Shadow Bolts out there. So obviously, like I said, at that point your rotation will change to Unstable Affliction, Corruption, Siphon Life and Shadow Bolt as filler. Beyond that, all you're really going to want to do is use Life Tap or Dark Pact when needed to get mana back, and then just simply work your way through that rotation again. Now, I have used the term rotation a lot. However, of course, this is more like a priority system when you actually look at it. And one of the key elements to the priority system here is going to be that third point about maintaining your dots. Now, maintaining your dots sounds like a simple task. However, there is a lot of nuance to it, most notably in the fact that you are going to want to put your dots on when you are almost out of time on their current incarnation on the target. If you replace your dots too early, you won't get full value out of the original cast, and if you replace them too late, of course the dots will have dropped off and been off for a substantial amount of time at that point. So ideally, you are going to want to put your dots on the target shortly after they drop off, so that you get the maximum amount of damage, i.e. the last tick of the dots, but without leaving the damage over time ability from being off the target for too long. Next up, we're going to talk about Demonology. Now, Demonology works much the same way as Affliction in the sense that you will want to maintain your Fell armor buff, as well as keeping up your assigned curse following the same rules as we discussed in Affliction. Now, the difference starts with the pet, however, where you are going to be dropping the imp in favour of the Fell guard, only using other pets in very niche circumstances, but generally speaking, it's going to be Fell guard all of the way. From there, you're going to want to maintain Immolate and Corruption on your target, But of course, following the same rules as we mentioned before for dot upkeep, trying to let the dots run out on the target, but with your refreshment of the dots coming almost immediately after the others have worn off, and then Shadow Bolt to fill, with life tap when needed for mana. As you can see, this is a much more simplistic view of a rotation than comparison to Affliction. However, that is because a lot of the pressure is taken off of you by the fact that a lot of your damage comes from your Felguard. This is both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on the content where you are engaging. If you are taking part in content where Felguard's viability is somewhat lower, then of course you are going to suffer for that in terms of your personal DPS. And lastly, we have the Destruction rotation. Now, Destruction is going to start off much the same as you can see here, maintaining Fel Armor as well as your assigned curse. Now, we do get some variance here depending on your talent spec. Now, if you are using this spec to level, and as a result are using the spec I recommended earlier with the Shadow Fury, you will not have the ability to sacrifice your demon. And as a result, you won't be able to sacrifice the Succubus, which is the optimal DPS choice. If this is the case, you should use your Succubus or your Imp, depending on what you're doing. Imp tends to be better for the for the group content, I apologise, and the Succubus is better for solo content. However, of course, if you're soloing, you may want to use your Voidwalker also. If you are using this spec or a variant thereof for doing endgame content, then you may wish to get rid of Shadow Fury in the preference of having the ability to sacrifice your Succubus. After you've managed to figure out what you want to do with regards to your pet, however, the actual rotation is kind of simplistic. Basically, all you're going to want to do is maintain Immolate on the target at all times, and then just use your Shadow Bolt to fill. It is very much a priority that you use your Shadow Bolt enough to keep your uptime of your improved Shadow Bolt debuff up at basically all times. This isn't that hard to do, as Immolate is a relatively long lasting dot, so you're going to be pretty much spamming Shadow Bolt. However, it is crit dependent, and as a result, this is one of the many ways that Destruction benefits from being at a higher level of gear. Now next up, we're going to talk about stat priority, and if you've watched some of the other videos in this series, you'll know that this can be something that can be wildly variable depending on the spec of a given class that you are playing. However, that is not the case for Warlock. Warlock, of course, is a DPS only spec, and as a result, especially when you consider that all of its specs are also spellcast only, the stat variance really isn't that high. All 3 specs are going to want to cap their hit cap first before anything else. This is something that is going to be somewhat easier to do for Affliction, as you are essentially going to prioritize hitting the soft spell cap, i.e. the Affliction spell cap, when you have your talents that give you the 10% lower resist chance. After which then you can prioritize spell power and pick up hit rating to finish off the rest of the hit cap for your Shadow Bolts, before then having your haste and crit at relatively even in terms of their value to you, and then just a mixture of stamina and intellect to finish. That's something that I'm essentially just not going to talk about from here on in, because stamina and intellect is going to come naturally with the progression of gear as you get better and better gear looking at other stats. For Demonology, you are going to look at that spell hit cap once again. You are going to be using spells from the Affliction tree, but it's not going to have that talent for the resist chance reduction, and as a result is going to be that you are going to have to hit the hard spell hit cap before anything else. Then moving into spell power, then you do have a slight edge for haste over crit value, according to everything that I've been able to read, but it is minor, so basically picking up as much haste and crit for your spells as possible, and then stamina and intellect. Moving on to Destruction, however, we do have a slight change. Your spell hit cap is once again going to be your absolute bread and butter, and what you're going to need to get first and foremost, before moving into spell power. Now, crit and haste, unlike the other 2 specs where they're almost equal in terms of viability, you are going to have quite a bit of a lead on crit value over haste, because you are going to get most of your damage from your Shadow Bolts as opposed to from your dots. Haste does still have value for you and is something you're going to want to pick up, but if it comes to a choice between crit and haste, you are going to want to go for that crit. Finally, again, stamina and intellect rounds things off, but that is something that's going to come naturally when you are just progressing your gear from playing the game. Now, our next point of discussion is going to be the journey to level 70. Now, if you are familiar with the other guides in this series, then no doubt you'll be sick of hearing me say that the best way of leveling to level 70 is going to be through dungeons. Now, this is going to be true for every single class and spec in the game, and obviously by inference that means that Warlock is no exception. This is because it allows you to farm reputation in the dungeons between neutral and honoured while you are on your progression route up to level 70. This means then if you get to honoured, you can then do the quests at a later date, getting the same reputation value but at a higher existing rank on your reputations, when the quests have no limit to what reputation they provide reputation at, i.e. if you are revered and do quests, you can get up to exalted, whereas the dungeons, while you are leveling, only provide reputation up until the point you are honoured. Once you are honoured, you do not get reputation in the lower level bracket leveling dungeons. Getting to this done is going to be incredibly important, both for the progression of gearing in the early stages with the reputation rewards that I'll throw some up on screen for you that you may be interested in as a Warlock, as well as also the attunement process. Now, the attunement process is something that's incredibly important in TBC, as it is basically what locks you off from participating in raids at max level. Now, I'm going to pop up on screen for you now 2 pictures, one of which is going to show you a basic understanding of what you will need to do in order to become attuned for the raids. The second of which is the same picture but highlighting in red the areas that are basically reputations you can begin the farm for by doing the dungeons to level on your way to level 70. As you can see, it makes up quite a big portion of the attunement process, and having that out of the way, completely done for you before you even get to level 70 is a big task that you can cross off the list of tasks to do at level 70 before you even get there. Beyond this, as another minor point of note, is that gold is something that a lot of people struggle with, and there are a lot of purchases that you're going to be wanting to make in your journey through TBC, and the completion of quests at max level, in order to finish off these reputations and get them to exalted, will also provide you with additional gold. If you are not receiving experience, i.e. you are max level in TBC and you complete a quest, then you will be given gold proportional to the amount of experience that that quest would have given anyway. I am not too sure on the absolute numbers because this has been a very long time since TBC. However, the numbers I've been able to find online say that you can get anywhere in the thousands of gold region, anywhere from about 1 to 3,000 gold for the completion of all of the quests after you have reached max level, which is something that's going to make a very large dent in the 5,000 gold that you are going to need for your epic flying if that is one of your goals. Now, the final point of this video is going to be discussing any significant points of note for the class in question. Obviously today that is Warlocks, and we only really have one, and it's not that big of a point in all honesty. But if you are leveling up a character for TBC, or if you haven't already done it because of the difficulty of the quest chain for unlocking your Warlock's epic mount in Classic, then rejoice, as the difference of the difficulty in the questline is dramatically reduced for TBC comparative to Classic, most notably in the item requirements being lowered. According to what I can see, I have had differing reports depending on where I'm trying to get the information from, as I did not play Warlock in TBC and I was unfamiliar of this, but apparently a lot of the quests that require you to collect a large number of items have been dramatically reduced in terms of the amount of items you will have to get to complete this question. It is still going to be quite an arduous process, but it is definitely easier to be done in TBC than it is in Classic. Now that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do let me know down below, and if you have any questions or if there's anything you feel that I missed, then please do let me know that too. If you'd like to be kept up to date with any future videos in this series, then do of course consider subscribing to the channel. But for now guys, that's going to about do it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next one. Later.